I'm the apron wearing permaculture chicken ninja master. Take it a step further, or even shift that a little bit and say, grow what's right outside your heart. Never before have we had so much information at our fingertips. Really? So there's no rule that you have to quit your job to homestead.
The Abiders Urban Achiever Podcast.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. Well, Justin Rhodes, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I've been following your videos for some time now. Nick, who is joining us in the show today, he got me interested in Joel Salatin, which you guys have shared some videos together. And I was just very deeply inspired by his book, and then watching your work. I love seeing what you have going on your farm, and just some of the practical tips that you give folks that are looking to get involved. And would you call yourself a permaculturalist or a permaculture farmer?
I'm the apron wearing permaculture chicken ninja master. So yes, permaculture is in there.
Okay. So how would you tease that?
Also call myself an apron wearer. Okay. I'm a lot of things. Yeah. Husband, father, son.
I was gonna say we had we wore shop aprons and machine tool when I was in high school, and those were great. So nothing wrong with aprons.
Yeah.
So kind of tease that apart, man. How would you describe that? How would you describe the day by day of what that entails?
Of being a permaculturalist? So, well, I would like to say this. Permaculture serves me. I do not serve culture. So as long as permaculture is getting me towards my goals, then we use it. And then where it doesn't, we don't use it. It's just a toolbox, so to speak. So for the everyday, though, the ethos of permaculture is to love the earth and love people. And so I can get that. And really, it's a way of looking at things different. So the way it's impacted me the most is look at things and make connections. So you can be a great gardener and go at the gardening thing and have a gardening book and become a master gardener. You can also be a chicken ninja master over here and be really good at chickens and have those two things. That's fine. And that's a way of homesteading. But what's beautiful is when you make the connections between those things. And then all of a sudden, you don't have two systems. You have one, because you realize the garden needs fertilizer, the garden needs weeding, the garden gives food. So you go down this analysis of what the garden needs, and then you go over this analysis of what the garden needs and gives. So the chicken scratches, the chicken manures, the chicken, that's the things they give, the chicken, and the chicken needs food. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, the garden gives food. The garden gives food. The chicken will scratch. Let's use the chicken to prepare the ground for the garden, then grow the garden, and then feed the chicken from that garden. See? And then it becomes my first permaculture teacher, or I studied permaculture under Jeff Lawton in Australia. And he taught me that permaculture is the toolbox that the elements are inside. So an element is chickens or gardening or compost or cat pigs. What permaculture does is put all those inside one toolbox.
Okay. So how would that differ from what would I don't like to use the word traditional, because kind of like what Joel said, this isn't normal traditional type farming or conventional farming. How would permaculture farming, or the ideas within permaculture, differ from I guess conventional nature, the predominant culture of North America, which is the only one that I can speak to, being a North American?
The permaculture, the first thing that came to my mind there was that permaculture works with nature rather than against it. So you're looking at her to partner with her, to see her as a teacher. And one classic example is in traditional gardening, you would, or monoculture market farming, you bare the ground. You're gonna till it, open it up, and then plant one thing. So but if you look to nature as a teacher and a guide, that's not what happens in nature. So nature, first of all, is she's very modest. She never wants covered, so she's always over herself. So instead of bearing her down like that in permaculture, you would use a mulch garden. And so you would say, oh, what's nature do? Well, look at the woods. Look what happens in the woods. They drop all these leaves in the fall and they cover this ground, and there's no weeds in the woods, and the woods are thriving without any of our help. So, well, how can I implement that in the garden? Here's this, the chickens have prepped it perhaps, and it's bare. What do we do? Well, then put down some mulch, right? So put down leaves or wood chips or anything, and then plant into that. And then what's cool about that is not only you haven't disturbed the earth. So, the tilling, especially excessively, can be bad for things. So you haven't tilled because you have all this on there. It's holding in moisture. So that's better for your plants. It's better for the worm life. And, they're in there digging and doing their vermicomposting magic. And so and then as you have this mulch also, you don't get these weeds coming through. So in many ways, it makes it easier. So working with this power of nature instead of against her, it might definitely can alternate maybe what you want to do, but you kind of have to shift and say, instead of planting all one thing, well, nature doesn't do that. And maybe you set out to do that. Maybe you just be a corner or something, but then you think permaculture and you're like, well, maybe I kind of need to rethink that. And instead of corn, what could I do to have many things there? Even how could I incorporate corn and still do other things among that? I mean, there's like the Three Sisters where you have the corn. That's an example. Permaculture isn't necessarily anything new. You have the corn, but then you plant the bean that climbs the corn. So then that corn serves as the pole for your bean. And then you could plant a squash at the bottom, and that squash is low growing and grows fast, and it's really leafy. So it shades out the bottom and gets out the weeds. So, maybe instead of planting your corn every 6 inches, you're planting it more, but then you're getting 2 other species out of it. And you're hopefully eliminating some weeding and getting more crops and more diversity.
Right.
If something happens to the corn. I mean, if that corn grows up and then something happens to it, well, you still got other things there to fall upon.
How did you get involved in that lifestyle into permaculture farming?
Well, we were already growing our own food, and so we were. I alluded to it a little bit earlier, where you have the chickens over here in the garden. Things are kind of separate, and we kind of had that kind of homestead. But then coming down with symptoms of Lyme disease and beginning to suffer from that disease, my physical abilities were waning. So I felt in my heart, as I was downgrading the farm, from this massive market. Massive is a strong word, big market farm, down to more of a homestead and just keeping the bare essentials, that I felt in my heart that there had to be a better way. There had to be some sort of connection. And I really thought in my head there had to be some sort of connection. And I guess that's what permaculture does for making the connection nowadays, because once a friend sent me it was a Jeff Lawton video. He had a farm tour on YouTube, and it was this chickens going ahead and knocking down the weeds and tilling this, and they were in this net and mobile coop, and then they would move them on and they would plant stuff behind them. And then Jeff had been doing that long enough that in that same video he could say, and then here's what it looks like weeks later, because it's in a sequence there, and you could see the bounty and what was going on there. And it just fascinated me. And he was working, he had systems not just for chickens and gardens, but he had duck systems, he had tree systems and all kinds of different things growing around their trees and all this kind of cool stuff. And I was like, all right, well, that's for me. And so then I just began studying, and so it was just that the natural progression. We had already been warmed up to it, because we were already ditching the grocery store and starting to grow our own food, and we were already turned on to gardeners like Elliot Coleman and animal farmers like Joel Salatin, who I believe he would say himself he's a permaculturalist. So it was a natural thing that then helped me bring everything together. Today, It's interesting because I just put we just put our grazing animals out to pasture. So we had them on this winter deep bedding system. So we had our cows and our sheep on wood chips during the winter,
Okay.
and they will poop every day, and then we go and put a little bit of corn on that poop, and then we cover that poop with more wood chips, and it keeps it fresh. I mean, it's right outside. I'm looking outside my window and can see the barn.
Mhm.
Smell good. Smell good. And we did that all winter, and we just put them out. And now what's up with the corn? So then I bring in the pigs, just like Joel Salatin taught me. And the corn has been sitting in this deep bedding, is getting deeper and deeper, and it's mixing with this manure and this carbon, which is the wood chip. And so it's composting, it's heating up, and it's fermenting that corn, and it's softening that corn up, because these are whole grain corns. And I put the pigs in there. I didn't have to teach them nothing. They got these long nose. They're tilling. What does a pig give? Well, he gives rooting, and so he's going for this corn, searching and eating for it. So not only is that food for the corn, the pig then is turning that compost. And so then and outside of that pole barn where we keep those animals, we have this what you call sacrifice area, and I learned that from Joel Salatin. We have this area. For us, we put it in the south facing so that the cows can be out there in the sunshine. That's where we're going to get our sun in the northern hemisphere. And they would poop and pee there. I mean, we would pick up some of that so it just doesn't get crazy nasty. We put wood chips down. And the idea is, well, we move them out. And now what we did was we covered that with a silage tarp, a UV treated plastic silage tarp. And what happened though was I realized, wait a minute, this is Joel Salatin teaching me the sacrifice area and planting a garden in it, right? But Joel Salatin doesn't mulch that. I'm mulching it. So I used wood chips. It's a little bit of permaculture influence. It's maybe back to the Eden Paul Gauci influence. And then I did the silage tarp because we're not ready to plant there. We got 4 more weeks. Weeds will grow there. We're in North Carolina, 40 inches. Covered it with that tarp because then when those seeds we just started them today, in 4 weeks they'll be ready to transplant there. So we're going to plant a big pumpkin squash patch there. So what happened? We ended up using we married 3 things. We were influenced and put together what Joel taught about the sacrifice area, and then what permaculture or Paul Gauci taught about wood chipping the garden, what nature teaches about covering herself, right? And then what J.M. Fortier does for high efficiency market garden on a small scale level without machines. And we married those 3. So we just continue to progress and become original by taking what we see. Permaculture is serving us in that way, and then Joel Salatin was serving us in that way, and we're just making it our own. And I think anybody can do that.
Yeah. So
with permaculture or anything,
is how much of this is trial and error, and how much of this is research? I mean, it seems daunting to a lot of folks looking to get into this, and especially if they didn't grow up in a rural environment. I grew up on 20 acres. My grandma farmed, but it was all conventional style farming. That trying to get involved in this in my 20s and 30s, it seemed very very difficult. This kind of like hunting, very similar to hunting. It's almost as if there's it's not something you grew up with, it can seem very challenging to get involved in. So how are you working through those natural progressions, especially for somebody like that's trying to get involved in it?
I would say let's err on the side, go for more trial and error than knowledge.
Yeah.
Because too many people get caught up in analysis paralysis, and you want to study and know everything. I don't even know everything. I've been doing this for 50 years. I can email Joel. I've got several people that I can text that I met when we were on the Great American Farm Tour. and still don't know all the answers. And,
Mhm.
we're just starting with the sheep species and have only had them for a couple of years. Did our first lambing. You can't let that stop you. Now, if you look at me and say, oh my gosh, Justin has pigs and he's doing all this complicated stuff, you just talk about what Pfizer, what?
Mhm.
No, if you're in that spot, you're overwhelmed, where to start? Back to what Bill Mollison in permaculture, start right outside your door.
Mhm.
And it's this big idea that if you can't cultivate right outside your door, if you can't grow a basil plant in your windowsill in a 5-inch terracotta pot, no way you're going to develop a yard, and there's no way you're going to develop a sustainable 5-acre homestead. Forget it.
Mhm.
So grow right outside your door. But I'd like to take it a step further, or even shift that a little bit and say, grow what's right outside your heart.
Mhm.
And you don't have to explode your heart and answer all your biggest wishes right away. If you like basil and you haven't started, what are you doing? Get off there. Well, sorry. Okay, wait. But right after the show, you can order. You can order like I think Amazon or somebody. They have these kits where you can buy the seed, you can buy the pot, and they'll even ship you the soil. Then you get some of that experience, and then you realize, hey, you know what? Maybe I don't want to do a container. I've got a yard. Is the container the best thing? Having soil shipped to me, is that good? Should it be organic, or figure all that out kind of as you go? I mean, you don't want to look. Even when we first got it started and did our own garden out there and tilled with a rototiller, we borrowed one from a neighbor and tilled it. That's not the best idea. I've learned since then. And there are better and easier ways to do it. But we did it. And we were growing food in our yard as opposed to trucking food from California.
Right.
Okay. So sure, I ran a gas tiller. Even now I'm using plastic as in a silage tarp to keep weeds at bay for temporary. Yeah. I mean, the tiller thing, we grown, and look, here's what's even worse. I had this brilliant idea, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna grow this garden. Let's till. I contacted the first guy I knew that might have a tiller or knew something about gardening, brought him over and just trusted him, right?
Mhm.
And he did good, very nice man. We put that garden in. We had a very successful garden. I had this, oh, there are these weeds. We're weeding them with a hoe, and then, oh, what if I took that tiller? I could borrow the neighbor's tiller down the road and get it more often. I'm just so smart. I'm going to go in there and till all those weeds. Well, I didn't know. I didn't know that I was just destroying a microbial life of the soil by keep on tilling that. But I was doing something.
Yeah.
And it didn't take me long for me to figure that out. I'm not saying don't know anything, don't try to learn. I'm not saying that. But too many people err on, I don't know it all. I can't do it. And they let them back. But I love the Paul Grieve story where they were sitting around watching. They're normal people, not growing a thing. This guy from Primal Pasture said, somebody brought it up. We ought to grow our own meat chickens and sell them. And somebody's like, yeah, that'd be a good idea. And they all talked about it during the commercial. And then they just went back to the ball game. I think it was it might have been the Super Bowl or something. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
And then one person, the story, then one guy came back in the room and he's like, about 30 minutes later, I ordered the chicks.
Mhm.
They're like, what? We were just talking.
Yeah.
They ordered 50 chicks or something.
Oh man.
Well, guess what happened? When you order 50 chicks and you've got 3 weeks, you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And if
yeah.
you know nothing, you're going to talk to Mr. Google Pants and figure it out really quick.
Right.
How to get started with little chicks. And never before have we had so much information at our fingertips. Really.
I know.
And you can just go. And then if you got those chicks and 1 or 2 are dying or whatever, you could go talk to Mr. Google Pants and find out what's going on and figure it out. So that's more along the lines of what is just get started, but it's no harm in continue to learn and get better. I always say, just go at it and make change. And if you change just 1% every day, well, then you doubled yourself in just 72 days.
Yeah. There's an author by the name of Arthur Haynes, and he talks about conservation through use, which I love. I've heard him expound upon that in a few podcasts, where uh, an example that he gives is perhaps just an endangered animal or an endangered plant. He's a taxonomist by trade, and it's nice and pretty to look at. Kind of tendering back to the Leave No Trace movement. It's great to look at. It's fun to talk about, but so very little about it. So therefore you abstract it. And then when it becomes extinct, it sucks, but it doesn't really bother your day that much. Whereas if you look at the work that say Ducks Unlimited has done, which is a hunting advocacy group and a conservation group, they've single-handedly restored the wetlands that these ducks depend upon. And they're hunters. They're taking the lives of these animals, but at the same time, they're feeding that which feeds them, which it sounds like you've done with the work that you're doing. You're feeding that which feeds you, and building that relationship through trial and error, but also with the dare I say the knowledge that, or the obligation that you have to these animals that you're bringing onto your property, the plant life that you're growing, as opposed to a war with the land, which agriculture at times is rightly criticized for. It's an accord, it seems like, an agreement that you're making with the land.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. So let's see here. Yeah, the other thing that I wanted to bring up was looking at food as like a sacrament, communion, or the company that it presents by having it. And when we're trucking food in from across the country, we tend to lose sight of that. I've seen that in a few different documentaries where they bring up, how people, all they see food is this prepackaged meat. They don't know where any of that comes from. They don't know where any of their food is sourced from. And even if, just getting out there and trying to plant that one thing, like you're saying, it gets you just a little bit closer to understanding where that food comes from. Is that fair?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I've had people in our, we'll butcher animals and we'll put that on YouTube. And I've had people say before that, hey, you shouldn't kill animals.
Mm-hmm.
You should buy your meat at the grocery store. And they meant it in the way of a huge disconnect, as if the meat in the grocery store didn't have to get killed.
Yeah.
That's how disconnected some folks are.
Yeah. Well, if people saw what goes on at these CAFO farms and had to have those farming structures in their backyards, I think that the amount of that meat that was purchased and eaten would drop off exponentially. But it's out of sight, out of mind, right? One of the things that Joel brought up in his book that I don't know who took it from who. I revere both of them, but George Carlin also talked about it, is the NIMBY principle, not in my backyard. And I think Joel talks about it more like the CAFO farms and such. George was talking about prisons and these kind of things that we want more of. We want more food, we want more prisons, but we don't want them in our backyard. And if you keep those things out of sight, out of mind, it makes it a little bit easier to do these really nasty things to these creatures that we share the earth with, this other than human life form that we commit ecocide on and genocide on at just exponential levels, as opposed to, again, being close with those animals, understanding their nature, their habitat, how to feed them and give them a life that I can't. How is it that Joel talks about it with chickens, the chickening of the chicken, or something to that nature, or honoring the chickenness of the chicken. Yeah. What are some ways to acquire land, to start out in this way? Like if you have somebody that's living in a city that, there was one of the videos that you had recently published about the police officer that left the police department. He was living in the city and wanted to take that step into homesteading, into permaculture farming. How would you advise that person moving forward, especially if they don't have a background, or they're caught by this wall of YouTube and Google, and they're paralyzed just trying to figure out what the next step is?
probably the most comforting thing I can tell that person, or maybe not comforting thing, is don't quit your day job. So if you're going into homesteading, which is what we're talking about here, we're not talking about professional market farming. That's different. Because then you're quit job and you're starting another job. You're starting your own entrepreneur as a entrepreneur job as a market farmer. So there's no rule that you have to quit your job to homestead. Now you may hate your job, and that may be part of why you want to homestead and why you want to move to the country. Maybe you have a city job. And I say don't quit your job, meaning I should say don't quit working.
Yeah.
Or having a job. So that would probably be one of the first things is sure you can save some money on food, but it can also be expensive to get started and get some infrastructure in the ground to make this happen. And you may start for saving money on food, but then you may end up thinking like us, well, now I'm doing this for my health. And you're willing to spend more than even if you were to buy it, because you can't buy this kind of quality in the store.
Right.
So fund that. And I would say then the thing to think about is what can you do your job from? Again, now we have no better of opportunity than what we have now. It's totally normal to be able to work from home. Companies have shifted with everything that's gone on in 2020 with the pandemic and everything. It's totally normal. Now is the time to say, I work from home and keep your job. Now, maybe it's an in-person job. So then you look for a job that is stay at home. And if you've got the guts and the spirit hasn't been ruined in you, and you obey this natural desire, well, then you become an entrepreneur. And I do think you can become an entrepreneur. I think that sometimes that gets stifled out, that creativity gets busted, but I think naturally inside of us, we want to, when we find something good. So that's, and when we solve problems, when we find a solution to a problem, we share it. And that's what business is doing. So find problems that you think you can solve, and in exchange for that solution, monetary reward for solving that problem. So begin to, that's probably the easiest step is to, because most people are working for someone else's dream. So that would be the first step, is to either continue on that dream if you're cool with it. If you can't do it remote, if you don't like it, find somebody else that you could get behind and see if you can't work for them at home. I'm so adamant about bringing my kids with me to work. If I had a normal job, a construction manager that worked in the office or something and did a lot of computer work, I would have my kids there.
Yeah.
And if I couldn't, if they said you cannot bring your kids into anymore, I would say, okay, I'm gonna get a new job. I mean, I take it a step further, and I'm going to make a job, and I'm going to be the boss, and I can bring the kids in and out as much as I please.
Yeah.
So kind of getting into that mindset. I don't know if you wanted that more. We can talk more acquiring land if you want, but that's step one, is to think of the income source that's going to get you by, unless it's going to go and just like totally live off the land and unplug from the internet of like a Native American back in the day.
Yeah, and I mean, that's some option that folks take, but I think about the back to the land movement of the 60s, and there was some success from that, but you see a lot of folks from the city that they don't have the understanding of the land, and yeah, you abandon everything, quit your job, and you move out to the countryside with a bunch of strangers. And when you end up running into issues, people scatter. No, I think one of the things you brought up really that I'd like to talk about a little bit is when you're saying like bringing your kids to work and stuff. That used to be a more common trend. It seemed normal to bring your kids to work. It seems that's more so in recent times where that's a no-no, or we don't do that. But you're when you're involving family in this or making these shifts with family, part of it is, yeah, acquiring the land like we were talking about, but making that shift as a family. Can you talk a little bit about that? And the is there a need to be on the same page with spouse and kids when,
Mm.
especially if you're making a drastic shift, like from the city to the country, or
Yeah.
taking the shift from living that way full time, leaving a job, or perhaps shifting the financial burden, because you have to perhaps maybe live on a little bit less, or maybe gauge where your value is for what you're spending your money on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. That's probably one of the number one questions we get is, well, how do I get my on board, or how do I get my children's on board? And if
Yeah.
I think I heard you right, that's sort of what you're asking. They don't really like my answer for how do you get your spouse on board,
Right.
because I say you don't. And because I say relationship is more important. So this is not what you would expect to hear from a full-time homesteader,
Yeah.
but I'm all about the garden of peace. Focus there first. I think the family is more important than the garden. The family garden certainly than the food garden. So, and you need those, and they can complement each other. And I'm not saying that's bad, and that we can't. I'm not saying we give up and don't go there. But if spouse isn't on board, then definitely don't push it. I'm not saying don't try it up when they're in a good mood,
Right.
or kind of drive towards it. Because what if they're on their group forum and their little areas online saying, well, how do I get my spouse on board with Monday Night Football?
Yeah.
They might be into something that might
Yeah.
totally throw you off. So I think you first have to look at their perspective. Well, what are they into? What do they want me to be into? And so you got to then think, I don't want to change them. I need to change me, because you only can't control them. You can only control. So what are some things you could do to maybe shift that? And hopefully you're doing this in an honest and sincere, not trying to be manipulative, but try to understand what they want and try to serve them and get into what they're into. And I mean, it might be, I don't know, fixer up, or you might just want to pull you out. Okay. Well, maybe you need to sit down and watch some fixer up with them, and then do what you can within that boundary of that relationship. So if they're cool with you an hour after work going out and putzing around in the garden, then do it. If they say do not get chickens, don't get chickens. If they're cool with a garden, get a garden. I'm not saying give up on chickens, but get the garden, jam it out. They see how happy you are. You invite them out for the fun stuff. You can pester them a little bit. We never try to guilt or anything. They'll see your excitement. Maybe you'll cook maybe you hate zucchini, but they love it. Well, make a zucchini. Look up a dish. Look, really, really, really learn how to make a nice zucchini dish and make it for them. And so just kind of those gradual steps. And then, you keep bringing it up. They see how happy you are. It's a little more complicated and difficult with spouses. That's why I go so extreme to be like, just don't work on that relationship. That's first. Because in the end, happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
But kids, to get them excited, even if they're 12 or 10, doesn't matter. You want to move to the country. Maybe they're not excited. I mean, you got to, again, think from their perspective. How to Win Friends and Influence People is a great book that would apply to family situations where you thinking from other people's perspective and you want them to win. So what for kids, like we had some chairs today for our people bar in our communities. Need to put these chairs together. I saw that the kids could do it. This happened today, and they kind of didn't want to. They kind of did. So I thought, oh, how could I get them to do it? Now they're little. These guys were 11, 9, and 6. So I said, you know what? If you guys finish this, we got some extra cream. I'm going to make you vanilla and chocolate ice cream. Yay! They're tearing into this. Oh, can we keep the boxes? Yes, you can keep the box. And they've got this fort over there. All chairs are put together over there in like an hour. If the kid's 16, or this could maybe work with this. I mean, you got to give and take, oh, we'll go to the country, but it cost us less. We have some equity in our city home. We'll get a hot tub.
Yeah.
Your permaculture ethos won't let you get a hot tub, but do it for the spouse. To get her out in the country. It's going to be worth it in the long run, right?
Yeah. Well, we get so rigid in the things that we try and do. Well, you had brought up earlier about working for somebody else's dream. I think about that as, are you trying to get your spouse to work for your dream, or are you trying to cultivate a shared dream?
Yeah. Try to find a way where that can be a shared dream.
Yeah.
If the spouse is into hiking or stargazing, well, hey, we're going to be in the country. There's going to be no lights out there. I'll get you a telescope. We're going to have this equity from our city sale to going out to the country. I'm going to look for a job that online and work from home. So you'll have me more. I won't have that out, and maybe I'll start helping cook some of the meals. You just got to think from their perspective. So for a 16-year-old, you're going to think a little bit. They're not going to be excited about ice cream and cardboard forts.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to get more creative there. Maybe it might be some, as if we move out in the country, there'll actually be ability you to work with me, and if you work, we'll find this incoming thing. Maybe we'll sell some firewood, or we'll sell some eggs, and you can get some money. You can get paid. Maybe we'll do podcasts or YouTube videos, and we'll get some money there, and you'll get paid. So whatever it be, I'll let you take the car out more. Yeah, okay, we're going to the country. I know we're leaving some of your friends, but what if I let you borrow the car more than once a week, like we're doing now? You just have, every situation is going to be different.
Yeah.
But I think you go away from this looking at the person's perspective and trying to serve them, and then ultimately resolving to the most important. And I think it's that relationship.
Yeah. It's very well spoken. We, especially with kids, man, I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, and trying to frame these things that need to be done out, and we only live on a few acres. We have about 4 acres here. Trying to frame things in ways that they will not only appreciate but make their own. It's a little bit easier with my son because he likes being outside, but it's such a challenge sometimes. But I think that we get trapped in this. We see what works for us, what makes us happy, so we want to project that onto somebody else, because this makes me happy, so why wouldn't it make so and so happy if they do the exact same thing? But as you had said, we fail to recognize where they're at on their own personal path, and perhaps what serves you doesn't serve them, right?
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. With starting out in this, what were some, like, when you guys do animals as well, you said, other than chickens, or what all animals do you guys have on your farm?
Oh gosh, we're the EIO Old McDonald farm.
Yeah.
Milk cows, meat sheep, pigs, 4 species of birds. So chicken, turkey, duck, geese, and I think that's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many acres are you guys on?
I don't know, 6 or 7 things. We're using about 10 acres.
Wow. That's pretty wild. What did you guys start with when you guys started out with chickens, or how did this start to progress?
I think it was the garden. I think chickens and gardens go close together. If somebody's wanting to know where to start, I mean, again, I say grow what's close to your heart. If you don't like vegetables, don't garden. Don't grow kale because it's cool.
Yeah.
If you're a meat and potatoes guy, then only grow meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
So what we started with, the wife likes garden, so I like the geese, so we planted a garden. I'm more into meat, and so soon after we got chickens. Those two go well together, and I think that's probably the normal progression. A garden is socially acceptable, even Oprah gardens.
Yeah.
Martha Stewart, it's totally socially acceptable on basically anywhere, as long as you keep it neat and tidy. And then what then happens, you go to a garden, and then you get chickens, because I don't know, they're readily available, they're small, they give you egg and meat,
Yeah.
and then you realize, oh wait, the chicken complements the garden even better. And then once you got that chickens, all of a sudden you've become like a homesteader. Like
Yeah.
you've got more than one, you've become a permaculturalist, you got more than one element
Mhm.
there. You've got the garden and the chicken, and then you get successful with those chickens, and then it's just the chickens are the gateway drug
Yeah.
to homesteading, to the rest, like a significant lifestyle change.
Yeah. I never, we had Bantam chickens when I was a kid, but it was mostly, grandma taking care of the chickens and Chad running around playing with them, chasing after them. But, at, you know, after moving here and we started out with, I think, just 5, and we've had 3 flocks, then numbers varying from, I think we were down to 1 at once because they all got murdered, but up to like 15. And I never thought that I'd enjoy so much just sitting out and having a cup of coffee and just watching chickens do the silly things that they do, the weird noises and the
Nice.
scratching. And then, you know yeah, I'm a 21st century guy, so I get my phone out and I want to find out what these noises
Yeah.
mean, and or how are they communicating with me when they look at me weird, make those crazy noises. Well, yeah, they are. At least for me, that was a way for me to better understand these animals that I cohabitate the space with, that I have the opportunity for this amount of time, however long it is, to steward this land, to steward the animals that I've been entrusted with. And like I said, at least for me, I can only speak on my behalf, is I take great pleasure in, like I said, just watching them do it, the chickenness of the chicken. But then also, like you had said, pulling out Google or pulling up a Justin Rhodes video and like, well, what does the sound, what does the sound mean? Or, how are they trying to communicate
Yeah.
with me, or how can I better live in accordance with these creatures? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Um,
And that's everybody in your family, may somebody else might get a kick out of not watching them but taking pictures and putting it on Instagram. Somebody else
yeah.
might take interest in writing something about them, or somebody else might take interest in just getting the eggs inside and making a wonderful little recipe of the eggs. So
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
might have a little different thing.
Yeah. Yeah, my fiance made some really nice carrot cake yesterday and made it, and she loves baking. But that's the thing, is we don't have to buy eggs anymore. She goes out, she
Nice.
grabs the eggs that were laid for the day, brings them in, and we'll bake something or make a nice breakfast. And that's her way of
Yeah,
living in line with them. So my kids just like chasing them around.
there you go.
Yeah, they haven't embraced it by cleaning out the coop yet. I don't know how. I'm not. How do we get them to clean the coop out? That's the.
You tell them you're going to make an egg custard,
Yeah.
and you figure out some or ice cream, because we put eggs in our ice cream. So
Oh,
you
there you
figure
go.
out some sort of word.
Good, good. I have a question. I think that it seems as though that tide is changing, and maybe that's just because my YouTube history is full of stuff like this, or you tend to associate with people that align with your belief structure. But um, why do you think it is that historically, particularly in the 20th century and the 21st century, why farming has been looked down upon? Uh, I remember Joel writing about that in his book, how when he'd go on tour, when he'd tell people that he was a farmer, uh, they would think that he was There was one story in particular where he had a run-in with the TSA or with airport police, and they didn't believe that he was a farmer because he was articulate. Uh, why is it, do you think, that farming or living close to the land has historically had such a bad rap?
That's a good question. And I don't know, I can just jab at that answer. I won't dare say I have any idea of what the answer, but I'll even feel that sometimes, as I am a successful businessman,
Mhm.
and what we've done in our content creation business online and entrepreneur ventures before that.
Mhm.
And now that I venture more into creating some content, even for the online business world, uh, me being a homesteader, uh, even that feels a little like I am going to be looked down upon. I don't know if it's true, but usually if I'm learning something about business, the person is a blogger or a yoga specialist or just these really like clean cut type of things, and not necessarily this homesteader. And so, one thing I took from Joel early on in one of his books was he said he would always dress nice. Now, for him, that meant tucking in their shirt, having a clean shaven face, and that's what it meant. So for me, I don't know if anybody's ever noticed, but I'm always wearing a collared shirt. I got a nice apron, pretend nice clothes. Got a flat cap on and looking professional. So to try to turn that around, and I think that it must be people got away from it. So there was a big movement where when my dad grew up here, they said farm, everybody did. If you didn't grow it, you didn't eat.
Mhm.
And then, but it was a hard life just because of that, though. I mean, it was hard life. I mean, no running water, no electricity. That had nothing to do with having to grow your own food. I think they grow our own food today, but we had electricity and Wi-Fi internet.
Mhm.
Probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But because they didn't have air conditioning and any answer they want at their fingertips and community that we get online, that it was such a struggle. And so then when my dad got the opportunity to become a traveling salesman, he did it. Because one way thing is he didn't see that what he was growing, if he's growing raw milk, hand milking it on his farm, that's not the same as the milk you're buying in the store. What you're doing out there, taking all that time to do that takes a lot of time. Yeah, you could go out and earn. You could sell more orthodontics equipment if you didn't do that and just bought your milk at the store. And dollar for dollar, I mean, if you're buying the milk at the store, and if you had to buy that raw milk, it would be very different in price and quality. But if they're saying, I don't know if they didn't make that connection at first, that there may be some questionable things in these conventional foods that maybe aren't good for us. It seemed like we were very trusting. Now, so trusting. Now, then finally, now you get sick enough or something, fat enough or whatever, and you figure it out, and you're like, wait a minute. Mm-hmm. What's normal is not necessarily good, right, for me. And so that would be my guess, is that early on, it made sense in their mind to leave and do something better. Mm-hmm. Do something a little easier, something that would bring a little more comfort and productivity in lives. Mm-hmm. And then maybe it's held on, some of that's held on, some of that thought, but I think it's coming back.
Yeah.
It's certainly coming back because, it's now cool. It's now not, I told you it's acceptable to do a garden. Mm-hmm. Things have changed really fast. Thanks to quarantine and shortages. I'm 42. Food shortages was not my vernacular.
Yeah. Till
this last year. And people were, my message as we sell courses on how to grow food and my message is, it's healthier. It's something you can do with a family. You're connected to food. You can save money. But after 2020, you know what the number one message is? Security. Mm-hmm. That's the pain point now. And now people are growing their own food. Who cares if it's cool? Mm-hmm. Because I have to, or I'm not, because the grocery store, like there were times there were not chickens in the store.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so all these local market farms were blowing up. Mm-hmm. Talk to my friend Casey Ostrich, Honey Tree Farm. He's already just a month in. He's already met third of the year sale. Third, he's already like on farm sales are doubling and tripling. Talking to my friends, and then us as content creators for homesteaders on how to do this kind of stuff, tripling, quadrupling in interest. So it's coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like skinny jeans came back, bell bottoms came back, big old sunglasses. You see the women wearing the big old
Yeah, the
sunglasses. Those weren't
sunglasses.
cool in the 90s. You wore these little sunglasses.
Yeah, the
So
80s
growing your own
vibe.
food's coming back.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me into it would before 2020, I think it'd be fair to say that we were at this impasse where something has to change. One of the things that Arthur Haynes talks about in his book A New Path is all paths lead to rewilding. And if you really think about that for a minute,
Yeah.
it can go a really good way or it can go a really disastrous way, but all paths lead to rewilding. Um, what what do you think that what does the future look like that it demands that fidelity to the ebb and flow of the earth, which it seems like we've kind of become divorced from, which allowed these food shortages, which demanded the need for security, prompting people to go out and start these gardens. What do you think that future looks like? Do you think that's something that's
Yeah.
that we will see?
Yeah. He says that because everything leads to rewilding, because in the end nature wins.
Yeah.
So who said you want to be on? I think I'll be on nature's side. But that's comforting. And so, when I was studying culture and we were just having a side conversation over pizza or something, and we made this comment of, I can remember getting the internet for the first time when I was 20. And, my dad can remember getting cell phones or the TV. Okay. These are big social changes. My grandmother can remember the first car coming down the road. So it was cart country out here. So what's next? Right now we're at the internet, but what's the big thing my kids are going to see? Well, would it be what if it's a cart coming down the road pulled by a horse? And would that be such a thing? I mean, we all freak out about, oh my oil's waning or whatever, energy as we know it. Well, what might shift to something more efficient? But would it be so terrible if we went back to horses and carts?
Yeah.
So the future, I don't know. But what I do know is I've got two working hands full of calluses.
Yeah.
And I'm doing what I can inside the realm of my influence by growing my own food, get better and better at that every day, and taking something that's so good as that and then sharing it. Why? Because that completes my joy. You find something good, you share it, and that's what I'm doing. There are big problems in the world, but as I would leave with advice from what's his name, Lucas Nelson: turn off the news and build a garden. Just like I said, we have all this information at our fingertips.
Yeah.
It can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. So use it for what's good, but turn off that news and build a garden. And there is something about getting overwhelmed with stress. It's like, why do you wake up in the middle of the night stressed? Why are those stressful moments? This is why. Because when you wake up in the morning and you stresses, but then you actually get to work. And even if it seems impossible, you're in the heat of the moment, work, shoveling the compost, moving the chickens, planting the seeds, you ain't worried about it. And you actually affect probably the most effective change you can do.
Very good. It's all tabletop discussion is great, but yeah, if you're just sitting there not doing it, and that's the thing is we're doing this podcast, we're all sitting inside, talking about how great it is to be outside. At the end of the day, get outside and I hope somebody listens to this, and I hope they listen to the whole thing, but then gets off and goes and gets outside.
Well, I challenge them to this. This is what's so beautiful about a podcast. If I'm listening to a podcast, I'm milking a cow.
Yeah.
While I'm doing it. I'm working in the garden. That's the cool thing about the pod, washing the dishes. So if you're not washing the dishes or milking the cow right now, or in the garden, then or turning the compost pile, then next time,
yeah,
you got a date with your podcast. in the garden.
in the garden. Cool. Can you talk a little bit about your YouTube channel or anything that where people can find you, or anything that we didn't touch on that you think would serve this conversation well?
Yeah, sure. If people want more of me and want to follow along the adventure, we put up movies every day on YouTube, Monday through Friday, and you can easily find it at thejustshow.com, and that'll take you to my YouTube channel, or you can search YouTube for Justin Rhodes, and I'll come up. You'll see me, the crazy lady, right there, and click and enjoy that, and just watch our family in Western North Carolina, setting out to grow our own food, getting better every day, making plenty of mistakes, but getting better single day and helping other people do the same.
Yeah. Cool beans, man. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. I really do appreciate it. I think it was a really good discussion. So
yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, this is Chad from the Abiders Urban Achiever podcast. Thanks for checking that session out with Justin Rhodes, man. If you enjoyed it, I want to ask a favor from you. Click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell button down below to receive updates on future content. You have no idea how much it helps out the podcast. If you're into the audio only kind of thing, head over to anchor.fm, where you can find this and other great episodes. Check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff located down below in the description box. Until then, take it easy, man. Thanks. Bye.